Hey, all you Gretas and Shutascots out there. Welcome to Unit 3, Section 4 notes. We're still in human population dynamics, but this is a fairly long one, so I'm trying to split it up a little bit. So we're picking up on page 12 of your packet, where it says 1 million people are added to Earth's population every, any guesses? 4 days. That's it. Every 4 days we get another million people in this place. It's kind of crazy. So then going on, population began to explode about 400 years ago. So in your packet it asks why, and there's two big things. One, agriculture. Being able to actually plant and grow and cultivate your own food allowed for a lot more people to be supported. And then we also have improvements in sanitation and medicine. So it's super nifty when you get food and then you don't die. So those two things together helped the population grow greatly. So the next part says, will we exceed or are we already exceeding Earth's carrying capacity? And there's two schools of thought on this, yes and no. So the yes people, Malthus is one of them, going back to 1798, and he feels that the human population is growing exponentially while the food supply is growing linearly. And you guys saw this in the Ed puzzle you guys did as well. And a lot of people agree. The demand for our resources has to stop outstripping our supply. We need to find a way to get by using less stuff because we can't afford on this planet to support the population that we're going to have. So there's that. Some people also say no. Hey, the supply of intellect is growing as well, which means innovation and creativity will solve our problems and technological advances will increase our carrying capacity. And they have done so over time, but at some point we're still going to run out of room on this planet. So maybe we should get that under control sooner rather than later. So what are your thoughts? Do you think that we are at carrying capacity, we have reached carrying capacity, we are past carrying capacity? What do you guys think? So here's the thing. We don't even know what the Earth's carrying capacity is because technology keeps changing. We have had 50 years left of coal for probably the last 20 or 30 years because technology keeps allowing us to use the coal we have better. This is kind of interesting. So different studies say what is the carrying capacity for the Earth? 20 studies are saying 8 billion is the limit. I would love to keep the population below 8 billion or at least 9. But then you can go anywhere from 2 billion, which we're done with these ones, up to over 1,000 billion. I really don't think so. So even among scientists, but they disagree. But if you're looking at 65 different studies of Earth's carrying capacity, most of them will put it at 8 billion, which we will definitely be hitting and exceeding in the next 15 years, if not sooner than that. So what factors influence human populations? We've got a couple of them. There is an article that you guys can read on, that's coming up. So what factors influence human populations? So with populations, you can look at the size of the population. The more people you have, the more people you have of childbearing age. So the bigger the population, the faster they're going to get even bigger. You can look at birth rates and death rates. So how many babies are being born versus how many people are dying. You could look at fertility. How many babies is each woman making? Are they making 2 or are they making more than 2 or less than 2? That's going to affect how the human population grows. You can look at life expectancy. And so here's another one. If you're only expected to live to 45 or 50 versus expecting to live to 80, you may make more babies earlier or not. And then you have migration. So moving from one area of the planet to another might affect the populations in certain areas. So there is an article but from the New York Times, the unrealized horrors of population explosion. I'm not going to read this through you now, but if you look in Canvas, the link is there in the packet. So I would recommend reading this and answering those questions, but once again, that is on your own. So looking at age structure, this is the proportion of individuals at various ages. So you start at the 0 to 4, and then you go 5 to 9, and all the way up to 85 plus. And you can look at, if you have an area of rapid growth, you have a lot of people in the pre-reproductive stage and the reproductive stage. So if you look at this, most of this population is in pre or reproductive stage, with a smaller part of the population being in post-reproductive stage. So this is a very rapidly growing population. And this would be a good example of a test question comparing age structure pyramids. So rapidly growing. A slow growth is more up and down, where you have a fairly even number throughout, and then obviously going down as you get older because there's not as many people left. But something like this is going to have much slower growth because you don't have as many people in the pre and reproductive stage. And then no growth has actually less people down here, because they're not growing. They're making less babies. So if all these people made less than 2 babies, this is what it looks like. All right, so you have your three stages, like I just said. You've got your pre-reproductive, you've got your reproductive, and you've got your post-reproductive. And so when you look at those 3 groups, you can then justify in an answer why an area is going through rapid growth, slow growth, or no growth, based on all the things I just said. All righty, we are going, so which stage of the 3, being the biggest, indicates population growth in the future? So out of these 3, which one is going to say, hey, we're going to have a lot of babies in the future? Oops, sorry, go back. There we go. This one is the pre-reproductive stage. The more kids you have here means they are about to be reproducing, and then you're going to have more population growth in the future. And then which stage, being the biggest, indicates a future population decline? That's going to be the post-reproductive stage. So if you have most of your people up here, they're not making babies. They're done making babies. So you're definitely going to have that decline in the future. Alrighty, now on to the next one. This is the science of overpopulation. So we're going to go through this video, and I'm going to talk briefly about it, and then I will stop this video, and then we'll go on to the next one. So here we go.
So I assume you know that there's a lot of people on this planet. As of last week, Wednesday, I think, was when we turned over to 7. Nobody knows, but nobody knows exactly how many people there are. It's kind of hard to keep track of the big planets. But there are about 7 billion people on the Earth right now. And they keep getting born all the time. In fact, for every 2 people who die, about 4 are born. Every second, there are about 4 babies introducing themselves to this world, and there are less than 2 people saying goodbye to it. So easy math here, our world's population is growing by about 2.5 people per second. And as a reminder of this, during this video, I'm going to have 2.5 ping pong balls being thrown at me every single second throughout the entire rest of the video. Who's hitting me in the face every single time? Okay, instead of the balls, we're just going to do a clock because I get nosebleeds pretty easily, and I don't want you to have to see that. 7 billion people, it's hard to actually get your mind around how many people that is. Maybe if we were going to just sit down and count to 7 billion, it would take 200 years or something. On the other hand, there is plenty of space for them. If you took 7 billion people instead of shoulder to shoulder like we were at a state concert, those 7 billion people could fit in an area the size of Los Angeles. We couldn't fit on the Earth. There's space for us. So as long as there's space for us all, what's the big deal about having 7 billion people? Well, it turns out people have been thinking about this for a long time, since around 1800, when the world first clocked 1 billion people. I know what you're thinking, you're like, 1 billion? That's nothing. Hurrah! Well, at that time, all the economies in the world were based on agriculture. How much stuff we could grow with human hands, farm animals, maybe a scythe, a wooden plow or something. So that kind of technology, a billion people really pushing it. And the first big-time thinker guy totally had a cow about there just being too many freaking people was a British economist named Thomas Malthus. Thomas Malthus calculated that human populations tend to grow exponentially, while the ability of humans to feed each other tends to grow more linearly. And so our growth as a species tends to outstrip our ability to feed everyone. And when that happens, it's pretty obvious what happens is the famine and the starvation. And for people who are left over, don't die of those things, they can get taken care of by disease and war. Basically, Malthus thought that humanity's natural state was to be cruel, miserable, pathetic, and sniveling in a pile of dirty underpants. In his essay on the principle of population, Malthus spices of mankind are active and able ministers of depopulation. They are the precursors in the great army of destruction, and often finish the dreadful work themselves. But should they fail in this war of extermination, sickly seasons, epidemics, pestilence, and plague advance in terrific array and sweep off their thousands and tens of thousands. Should their success be still incomplete, gigantic inevitable famine stalks in the rear, with one mighty blow levels the population with the food of the world. Diseases also have an easier time taking hold, and of course, starvation can kill off a lot of people as well. But we did make some pretty good points. As long as humanity is well fed, we're pretty nice, a lot of people. But I have the problem too. When my blood sugar just gets a little bit low, I start killing all of my neighbors. That's actually true. When you and your family's lives are threatened by starvation, there's a lot of things that you will do for food, including go to war. However, what Mr. Doom and Gloom didn't predict was the frickin' Industrial Revolution, which not only allowed the production of much more food with far fewer laborers, it was also the impetus for this. What that there is the population of the Earth busting through Malthus's ceiling, and then his atmosphere, and then his ozone layer, and then his mesosphere, and then his... Probably be pretty impressed by this. If you're not impressed yet, just keep staring at it. I can wait. I got all day. It took humanity 50,000 years to go from 0 to 1 billion people, and then to get from 1 billion to 7 billion, about 200. So wow, Industrial Revolution, thank you for allowing us to grow more food using machines, for the fast and efficient transportation that it takes to move all that food around for people who needed it, and thanks to the medical advances too, which helped us understand things like the importance of soap and the way that diseases work. And as a result, humans now live about 4 decades longer than the average guy in the 18th century. Dear Industrial Revolution. The Malthus might have been right about how freaking stupid it was to be a human if the Industrial Revolution had not happened. So now, the world's population is growing at about 1.1% per year, which is a tiny bit better than the 1.3% per year that got us here. If this current rate continues, by 2050, we should have about 9.3 billion people on the planet. So the question is, at what point are these numbers going to outstrip our ability to feed all of the people on the planet? It turns out, actually, that the question isn't how many people can the Earth accommodate, more like how many rich people can the Earth accommodate. Because people in general, they tend to demand stuff for their survival, like oxygen, water, and food. But rich people, we have different expectations. We, for example, in America have a lot of agricultural crops, and we have to use a lot of fresh water to water those agricultural crops. You want to take a guess at the number one irrigated crop in the United States of America. Unless you've heard this statistic before, you were wrong. It's grass. It takes more water to create lawns than it does to create all of the corn in America. We're using electricity, so it is a pretty scarce resource. We can use less than 1% of the water on our planet. Most of it is salt water that we cannot use to drink or irrigate crops, and 70% of our fresh water is frozen in glaciers. So clean fresh water, non-negotiable and scarce. So what's next? Food. The world's combined food output could feed around 11 billion people, and yet there are 1 billion people who need food. So yeah, that's one of the most pathetic and infuriating things about our planet. So there's enough food for 11 billion people, and there's 7 billion people, and 1 billion of them are hungry. Who is eating all of our food? Food is eating all that food. A huge amount of the food that we grow in America gets in turn eaten by livestock. It's so hard to say the truth, which is that, but rich people can do what they want. Now, when I say rich, it's important to note that I'm not talking about the 99% versus the 1% rich. I'm talking about if you have running water, electricity that comes into your home, a computer that you can watch YouTube videos on, and regularly can afford to eat meat, you're a rich person on the earth. Sometimes we just have to come to terms with the fact that we, even those of us who don't have it great in America, have it better off than a whole lot of other people. There's a lot of people in the world who don't get that. If you can have a hot shower, that's like the peak of luxury to me. So assuming that you are a first worlder, that you live in a developed country in Europe, or you live in America or Japan, you consume, on average, as much stuff as 32 Kenyans. And now the number of well-off people in the world is starting to increase dramatically and quickly. And this is what we've always wanted for the world. So now we have all these moderately well-off people walking around all over the planet, and it's great, except that they require more. In the meantime, though, a huge percentage of all of the babies that we're talking about being born right now aren't being born to these rich people in the developed world. They're being born in developing nations. And so the like this. So on average, Japanese are having about one baby per household. They're not even replacing themselves, compared to 2 or 3 babies in America, like 5 or 6 in most of sub-Saharan Africa. So developing nations are having a baby boom, and that's what happens when you get vaccines and antibiotics and safe water and better sanitation. You get fewer babies dying. We are all completely and totally in favor of fewer babies dying, I hope. But it also means that there are going to be a lot of new sub-Saharan Africans in the next 50 years or so, and that is where a lot of the 1 billion currently hungry people are already living. While those of us in the developed world are not having any babies at all, and yet consuming enough food for like 4 truckloads of babies, the governments of developing countries are struggling with where to put all of these new people and how to feed them all. And you also get what is known as a youth bulge. A lot of developing nations are currently seeing a huge explosion in people between the ages of 15 and like 29. And all those youth are out there looking for the same jobs, all at the same time, feeling generally hormonal as youth do and being pretty unhappy with their lot in life. Some social scientists conjecture that youth bulges like this have been responsible for nearly every insurrection in history, from the English Revolution in 1640 to the more recent Arab Spring. And neither of those things are bad things, but we should be aware that there may be more of it coming. And another thing the Reverend Malthus never thought of is what happens when humanity gets together and takes over the whole freaking world. Seriously, because it turns out that there are actually supposed to be some other things living on this planet with us. Who our desire for more space and more stuff, putting pressure on pretty much every habitat on Earth. So much so that worldwide, 52 species of mammal, amphibian, and bird move one category closer to extinction every single year. This world is pretty big, but there's only so much room, and it turns out that things tigers aren't particularly well suited to high-rise living. So the more there are of us, the fewer of literally everything else there is, except for like things that we enjoy eating, and having dogs and cats as well. Take their population. So happy birthday, new people. Welcome to Earth. I'll try not to screw it up too much for you. If you're interested in more things to do with global population, please check out the description below. There'll be links in there for our source materials. You can also ask a question and leave ideas for future episodes of SciShow in the comments, and get in touch with us on Facebook and Twitter as well. Goodbye.
Alrighty, that was also one of your Edpuzzles. So if you haven't watched the Edpuzzle, now when you go through it, you should really know the answers. And if not, you've heard it twice, so that stuff should stick in your brains. I'm going to go ahead and stop this video, and then we'll pick up with the next one. In case I don't see you, I want to take this opportunity to let each and every one of you know that you are good enough, you are strong enough, and you're strong enough and smart enough, and people do like you. And if I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good God, do your homework.